Hooray, let's start. All right, welcome everybody. This is the June Design Advocacy Group monthly meeting. It's great to have everybody here. It seems like a little weather forecast may have scared off some of our regular friends here, but it's wonderful to have everybody here today. We're going to get into our program in a minute. We usually go around the room, say hi. We're trying a little bit of a different thing here to get everyone to know each other and to network and connect. So I kind of put 60 seconds on my watch and let everybody make sure they're introduced to the folks next to them. This is actually going to happen. So I'm going to stop talking and you guys are going to start talking to each other, and I'll be back in 60 seconds. All right. We'll bring it back up here. Swap email addresses, phone numbers after, and stay connected. It is a big reason why we do all this. So I'm going to start with a few announcements, advocacy items, things that we have going on at DAG, talk about an upcoming event, and then we will get into our panel. So quick hitters on the advocacy side. Our friends at Scout have wasted no time, and ISA designed their summer pop-up bar, which is looking really cool and is almost complete. It's called, what is it, Frankie's Summer Club. So that's opening soon, and we're all going to head down to support them on Broad Street and try and make that a success as they continue their march towards the programming of that building. So that was some exciting news to see, and it's making the round in all the design publications. Other good news in this world of not so great news for our industry these days, but there are some new positions in the upcoming budget for the Planning Commission to bolster and strengthen that commission. Still pending confirmation in the final budget, but there is more to report on that as that gets finalized. So we are appreciative of that news. Also, an announcement down at the Stadium District that Populous has been selected to design the new 76ers arena. That's with Moody Nolan as the architect of record. We continue to talk to Comcast Spectacor as DAG and are going to provide some sort of an event, a meeting, as soon as they have something that they want to share. That's still a ways off, but we are continuing to talk to them. Lastly, on the advocacy front, SEPTA funding. Anything anyone can do. There are meetings. I know there's one in West Philadelphia coming up. They're all over the city at the state level. That's sort of the biggest push right now. So that's where we are on the advocacy front at the current moment. In terms of a couple other announcements, we've had a couple exciting awards in the DAG community. First off, the Design Advocacy Group won the CDC's Linchpin Award. So very exciting to receive that from the Community Design Collaborative. Define a linchpin indeed. So we are very appreciative of the Community Design Collaborative for that award, honoring impactful organizations that support the community design process. So thank you to Taiwan and to the volunteers at CDC who voted for that. Thank you to Jelani in the back who helps make all of our events here so wonderful. And Rebecca Johnson in her little pod there, president of the AIA. Everyone wants to wave to Rebecca. And then the following day on June 4th, DAG's own David Brownlee won the James Biddle Award for Lifetime Achievement in Historic Preservation from the Preservation Alliance. Pretty cool thing to get to both help shape the city and also engage with how we all understand the city. So congratulations, David. Our next event will be back here on July 7th. That's with Joe Cernick from SRDC, talking about the Schuylkill River Trail, recently completed bridge, the next connections and pieces that they're trying to do to link in as many communities around Philadelphia in order to make that not just a recreational trail, but a way to get to work, a way to move from community to community and connect all the parts of Philadelphia. So that'll be a great conversation. We have some more stuff in the works for August and September that Marcia and I will hopefully be able to divulge soon, but check our website. We update it as soon as we have things to share. So with that, let's jump into the program tonight. I was very excited to try to bring this project to DAG before I joined NORR, and now even more so. It's wonderful to welcome my colleague Adam Jekyll, who was the project lead on the architectural side for NORR, who's going to come up here and introduce the panel for 17 Market West, get us into the design, the history, and tell us a lot about this wonderful project. And then we'll have a Q&A with the whole panel. So keep your questions loaded and we'll go around at the end. All right, Adam, come take it away.
So I'd like to invite my fellow panelists to also take a seat. And it's great to be here. So welcome, everybody. So once upon a time, there was an office building that was primed for conversion to residential apartments. And part of the team that helped make that happen is here tonight. So I want to start with introductions. I'll start with myself and pass it over to you, Mark. So I'm Adam Jekyll, principal at NORR. I'm an architect focused on mixed-use multifamily in our residential sector. And I've completed several adaptive reuses in the past with Alterra, including the Robert Morris Building, 1201 Chestnut, and 414 South 16th Street. So NORR is a little bit about NORR. NORR is an architecture and engineering firm with offices in Canada and the US. Our Philadelphia office traces its roots back to GBQC, which was co-founded by Robert Geddes in 1953 in Philadelphia. So we were both the architect and structural engineer on this project, 17 Market West. So Mark.
Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. Mark Cartella with Alterra Property Group. I head up development and construction at Alterra. And if you don't know about Alterra, we are a local Philadelphia real estate development and investment and management company. We've been doing conversions now for some time. Over the last, I would say, 12 plus years. This is actually, 17 Market West is actually, I think, our 15th conversion in that time. So even before it was kind of in vogue and trending, we've been very active in that space, and happy to be here tonight.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jim Gardler with Bala Consulting Engineers. I'm the Director of Operations in our Philadelphia office. Bala is a 40-year-old MEP engineering firm traditionally, but we also provide structural, technology, commissioning services, and we've been involved in most of the major projects in the city of Philadelphia in the past 2 decades.
Thank you. I'm Brett Pastorius. I'm Vice President of Commercial at Clements Construction Company. I was the project exec for 1701 Market. Clements Construction is a regional general contractor here in Philadelphia. We've been around for 46 years, and we've done a number of conversion and adaptive reuse projects here in Center City over the last 15 years. I believe this is our 4th with Alterra, and we're happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry.
Oh, I do.
I think he's.
Okay, I guess I have to turn mine on. Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen Tognini. Eileen Tognini Design. I'm founder and creative director of my own practice. I have had the wonderful opportunity to have worked with Alterra for since 2012 and over 20 projects, many of which are new construction, but also readaptive use, and most closely, and with our partners here, Clemens, at One City. At Broad and Arch. So it's been exciting 2+ years seeing this conversion, and it's a remarkable story. So looking forward to sharing the interiors piece of it with everyone. Thank you.
So one of the things we did to generate a lot of excitement and buzz about the project is we did a fly-through video, and we're going to start with that. It's just brief. It's a minute. It's taking you through the building during construction, and I think you'll enjoy it. So these are all views. Here we are in the lobby. Up on typical floors as it's getting framed out and drywalled through the course of construction. There was
there was some
audio with
audio
this. I don't know what
before,
happened to the
yeah,
audio.
yeah.
The audio's not working. There was a music behind this.
It's not as good without the audio, but
all right.
shout out to Elevated
Yeah,
Angles who produced that content.
Exactly.
They do a lot of great work for us from a drone footage and time lapse capture standpoint. So they deserve some credit there. Elevated Angles.
Keep going. So going through the contents, we want to take you through this presentation in 4 separate parts, and we wanted to be holistic about how we approach it. So we're going to first talk. I'm getting an echo. Yes. Closer to the mic. Is that better? Okay, so we want to take you through the building in 4 parts. So we're going to start through talking about the building history and the context. Then we're going to talk about the exterior evolution of the building over the last 68 years, and then get into the planning and designing that includes interior design, MEP systems, and certain decisions that were made there with the floor plans and unit layouts. And then lastly, we're going to talk about details and execution of the project. So part 1, the building history. I think, these 3 photos are pretty fascinating because the building has changed significantly in its exterior design and its use over its 68 years. So it opened in 1957 for the Pennsylvania Railroad, who essentially occupied it till the 1990s, at which time Morgan Lewis decided to take it on as their headquarters. And it was fully renovated at that time, where they created ribbon windows and sort of this new addition to the side, and they added the parking garage in the lower levels. So one thing about Penn Center is that it forms, the heart of Philadelphia's central business district, but it's really great how connected it is to the city. And so it's one of the things that made it super attractive from an acquisition point of view. And Mark, I was kind of hoping that you could kind of touch on the advantages of the building location that really attracted Alterra to the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, the location speaks for itself. You're right there in the heart of everything in Philadelphia. But more so than just the location, this building really did almost check every box that we look for in a potential conversion. First, at the top of the list is, of course, location. I mean, that is the 3 laws of real estate, as we all know it. But it also had great floor plates. They were very manageable in size. I think they're roughly 90 by 260 feet deep. So they were able to really accommodate a residential program that was pretty efficient. And then in addition to that, it had tenancy that we really liked. It had 1 major tenant in the building, and the term was pretty reasonable in terms of vacating the building. So that opened up the opportunity to de-lease the building in a pretty aggressive time frame. So for that and some setbacks and a few other reasons is what attracted us to the building.
So one of the major advantages also of this location is the pedestrian concourse. So the first section of the pedestrian concourse opened around 1907, 1908. This is a map of the concourse from 1929. when the first dedicated section kind of connecting Race, Vine Subway to Filbert was opened. And you can kind of see that along Broad Street. Fast forward to 1956, this is Six Penn Center nearing completion, as well as the underground street that's part of Penn Center. So what you see in the upper right image is Commerce Street, which has a major advantage to this project. It basically has an entry point on 19th Street, goes underground, under 18th Street, and then under Market, where it eventually dead ends at 16th Street. There's a loading dock under 17th that became critical for construction operations. And maybe you could touch a little bit on that, Brett, on how advantageous it was to have that loading dock there, which is owned by the city, but has been great from a staging point of view, loading, unloadings.
Thank you. Yes, any project, Center City, you've got your logistics challenges, and it is very convenient that we had a loading dock right there off the concourse. It was a shared loading dock, so we had some challenges with that, but it was very helpful in the execution of the work. Unfortunately, that loading dock only led to one small freight elevator, so it wasn't, at the end of the day, it wasn't enough. And we had to put a man and material hoist on JFK in order to supplement that for getting the job done on time.
This is just a diagram showing Commerce Street. I think, maybe you could talk a little bit, Mark, about now that we have about 25 tenants in the building, how advantageous this has been for move-ins and move-outs. My understanding is this is what they're using, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I'll be first to tell you, I didn't even know that street existed before the project started. So seriously, do yourself a favor and go down 19th Street at one point in time, and you'll see off to the left-hand side, there's Commerce Street, and sure enough, it goes down. And I've worked in Philadelphia my entire career, and I never knew this street existed prior to this project. But what that really allows, guys, is just a very seamless transit and seamless move-in process from property management and lease up. And you don't even know tenants are really moving in because they're not in front of the building. They're not obscuring any of the building elevations or main entry points. So it really has been a great amenity, an embedded amenity to the building.
That's right. So here's a photo which I found in the Department of Records, which is pretty neat, that shows in red Commerce Street under construction, and to the right is 1701 Market. This is around 1956. It would open up a year later. And then this is just a map kind of showing how 1701 overlays with what's going on at Suburban Station and Commerce Street. I think this was really important to understand just why this was such a prime location for a conversion. So the outline that you see in orange is 1701 Market. To the south is Commerce Street. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have the loading dock under 17th Street. And then we have a pedestrian concourse in Suburban Station that basically cuts right through the building. And so between the pedestrian concourse and Commerce Street is our Concourse 2, C2 level, where we have several amenities and MEP rooms. So it's quite a nice space with very high ceilings. It allowed us to do things like a basketball half court and a pickleball court. We have plenty of ceiling height. And then to the north of pedestrian concourse is what would be retail space. So where the corner bakery is, that would be exclusively for use of the tenant. And I think in conversations with tenants, potential tenants, that's probably been an asset. If you have anything you want to add.
That's right. And so right now, leading off of C2 is actually the temporary construction office, which also is probably one of the nicer construction offices that you guys had. Is that not right?
Yeah.
Right. Meaning that they're not occupying a unit, an apartment, which typically takes place where they don't have a detached trailer, on the sidewalk necessitating a long, sidewalk closure permit. So, it is very unique. You have underground access, you have great pedestrian level access, and to Adam's point, that section of C1 is very connectable or communicable to the ground floor space that used to be Corner Bakery at the northeast corner of the building. So we hope to maybe use that and find a tenant that might be interested in both levels of that space.
this is just an enlarged view of the south portion of 1701, showing kind of all the amenities and MEP rooms and the outlines of how it all works. So I think next, the thing that's most noticeable to everybody probably here as you walk past the building is the exterior evolution and sort of everybody remembers what it looked like before and what it looks like now. So there are a lot of advantages to replacing the windows. It was both a practical and key feature in attracting tenants. And I think that, Mark and his team did a lot of research on this, particularly attracting tenants and the operability of the windows being paramount for the well-being and tenant comfort, bringing fresh air into every room. So maybe you could touch on that a little bit, Mark, like why, what you're hearing from tenants in your research, why full height windows were so important and having that operability.
For this building to be competitive with some of the new product that's being introduced in the marketplace, it was paramount that we have floor to ceiling height windows. And so when we were walking through the space, when it was originally ribbon windows, there just wasn't enough natural light or access to natural light and air. And interestingly, on the 18th floor, which was the boardroom level of Morgan Lewis, they actually had cut down the windowsill height at one point in time further before they introduced the ribbon height. And that kind of was what compelled us and inspired us to take it one step further and cut it down as low as possible to the existing deck elevation to achieve a rough opening that would accommodate floor to ceiling height windows.
Yeah, and this picture kind of really shows what's happening. So in 1957, we have 25% windows or punched openings, if you will. Then 1999, it goes to ribbon windows, about 45% of the facades, fenestration windows. And now we're at 66% windows. So it really has helped bring a lot of natural light into the dwelling units, given the depth of the building, which is around 87, 88 feet. So one of the things we used early on to proportion the building aesthetically was a tripartite approach. So tripartite's a very traditional approach to designing an element in architecture or designing a whole building. So I think everybody's aware the building had a very horizontal expression with the window, with the ribbon windows. And conversations with Mark and his team, we were looking to have a more vertical expression to the building. But beyond just having a vertical expression, we wanted to have a simple proportioning device to give the building a distinct base, middle, and top. And the reason for that was really to speak to the different functional programs of the building. So at the bottom, we have retail. Above that, we have the parking garage levels. And then there's a series of units, basically from the 6th floor to the 18th floor. And then at the top, we created what we call the sky frame. And I'm going to get more into the details on the sky frame, but I think that this sort of approach, accenting the verticality of the building since it's a high rise and kind of doing the tripartite design really improved the look of the building.
Yeah, no, for sure. Agree with everything that Adam just said. And because we are the shortest building in that immediate area, we really wanted to try to make the building feel a little bit higher and really accentuate some of the vertical components. And the NORR team, led by Adam, did a great job of introducing vertical ACM column enclosures. And I'm sorry if we're jumping ahead here, but
no, that's good.
I think them together with the depth that the new windows created really does a great job of causing the eye or luring the eye from pedestrian level all the way up to that top of the sky frame, which would be the top of the tripartite design approach.
So these are some conceptual renderings that we did as we were working with Mark and his team to kind of talk about our thoughts on the design, creating different rooms. So one of the image in the bottom right-hand corner is a rendering when you come off of the roof. So sort of in the middle of the existing penthouse, you come off the roof and you're about 100 feet away from the southwest corner. So at that elevation, you're about 4 feet lower than the pool. So we had to ramp up to the pool. So one of the things we wanted to do was create the perception of an infinity edge on the pool. So using that advantage of height, because we were 4 feet lower and being so far away, hasn't been finished yet. But the idea is that as a tenant walks out, they will have that wow factor for themselves and their guests, really seeing that water spill, what looks like spilling over the edge. And also kind of creating this cedarwood canopy above you, right when you enter with sort of ivy to kind of create a very greening and welcoming effect to bring a human scale to the roof deck. Beyond that, we were trying to create little rooms and pergolas. And maybe Eileen, you could kind of speak to the rooms and the furnishings and the different rooms and spaces we were trying to create up there.
Thank you, Adam. That's exactly right. The idea of having a large rooftop, but creating spaces where people can interact in different ways and create different landscapes of furniture and furnishings. So we have actually outdoor working areas where you can plug in, seating for 2 people to have dinner, 4 people, push tables together for larger community gatherings, the ability to move furniture away for building programming. All of these are very sort of critical points when we think about using the space. But literally bringing the interior to the exterior, thinking about that as just that, rooms.
So here's a view from, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. There's been significant progress, and now there's a bunch of pedestals and pavers up there, but it starts to kind of give you an idea and sense of the space. To the right in the photo with the tarp, that's where the pool is. The pavers are going to be basically at that level. And so you can start to see that the sky frame frames views out. One of the things we wanted on the sky frame is we created a 6-foot tall glass windscreen around the entire perimeter. And we wanted it to be 6 feet from the top of that windscreen to the underside of the ACM that wraps that beam to kind of create a 1-to-1 proportion. We thought that that was really appropriate. And so at the pool in particular, other places, as you walk further away from the pool where you have lower elevations, that height is a little bit more between top of windscreen and bottom of sky frame. And these are some views of the sky frame at night. So we had a lighting consultant, Kim, who's not here, but she was critical in kind of helping us to uplight this canopy of the sky frame. And we can change the color of the LEDs. The whole thing's illuminated. I think it creates a really, really nice effect at night, not just for the city, for people walking along, looking up at the building, but also for tenants that are up there. Anything you guys would like to add to that? No.
Yeah, no, that's right. It creates some visual interest, not only for occupants of the roof deck, but also from the pedestrian level. You can see a glow, a warm glow, and we're also able to be consistent with some other, trending themes. Go birds, right?
Yeah.
Red October, things like that.
A lot of green. So for anybody out there that's like asking themselves, what do I need to look for in a conversion? I have a building, it might be an office building, it might be something else. Like, what are the key targets for a conversion? And, how do I make that decision that a building's prime for conversion? So one of the things that I got, the first bullet point actually is from Leo at Alterra Property Group. He was interviewed by the New York Times a while back, about 1.5 years ago, I think. And he said, you start with the building, you start with the geometry of the building. And I thought, that's right. The geometry of the building is really critical. And what he means by that is the depth of the floor plate, right? So ideally from your living spaces where you spend most of your time, I'm talking about your living rooms, your bedrooms, your kitchen space, you want to be within 30 feet, I would say, of a window. Any more depth than that, and it starts to get hard for the light to penetrate that space unless you have really high ceilings. The other big thing is operable windows for fresh air. That's something we all desire in our spaces, that we can control that climate and bring in a nice breeze. The size of the windows for sunlight, right? Like if it has small windows, is it possible to increase the size of those windows? One of the things that Mark and I talked about was the existing stair locations. You want to avoid dead end corridors that exceed 50 feet. 50 feet is the maximum you can do at the end of a corridor. So we were able to avoid that here. Our corridor is about 49 feet. And we did that by extending 2-hour corridors, 2-hour rated corridors off the existing stair towers. But that saves a lot of money and it increases your efficiency. And then travel distance, into a unit to one stair needs to be at least 250 feet. And then elevators is usually not an issue on these buildings. They tend to be over elevated. But the rule of thumb we tell people is like 1 elevator per 75 units is usually what you want to look at here. We actually have several cars that we didn't use at 1701 because it was over elevated. And then an 80% efficient floor plate or better is ideal. And what that means is if you count the corridor, the stairs, the elevator, the typical electrical room on a typical floor, all that added together shouldn't be more than 20% of the floor area on a typical floor plate. If it is, then you're at an efficiency that might not make sense for your project.
Doesn't underwrite, plain and simple.
Anything else, guys? Want to add to the? So advantages of the conversion at 1701 Market. So the depth of the floor plate, keeping in mind what I just brought up, is 87 feet 4 inches. So it's not too deep. Your unit average is 41 feet deep, which means within 30 feet of the unit, you can have all your living space. So we pretty much located all the washer and dryer, the bathroom, the closet or walk-in closet, that was all along the corridor. So all that space doesn't necessarily need natural light. So that's why we took that approach. The centrally located elevator bank. So that was really convenient. Where the elevator bank was, we were able to make it work. And the short wait times due to the quantity of elevators. Tenants, don't want to wait a long time for an elevator. So we have 5 elevators that serve a typical residential floor, which is really good for the number of units. And then we were able to achieve 9-foot drop ceilings throughout, which was a big point for Alterra and Mark, and credit to the Clemens team for making that happen because it was pretty challenging. I don't know if there's anything you want to address there, Brett, but yeah.
I mean, we knew what they wanted. They told us 10 times. So we went through each floor
made it happen
and figured out how to make it happen. It was definitely a challenge, but it's expected. I would say there was quite a few other things that were a little bit more challenging on this project, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
So, and then much of the MEP infrastructure is able to be utilized. And, Jim has a whole series of bullet points and slides where he'll address this in a minute. And then well-positioned in existing MEP shafts, meaning we didn't have any existing MEP shafts that were at the windows or somewhere where we would naturally want to locate a unit. So this is a floor plate depth diagram. So this is just looking at a couple projects in Philadelphia, the tower at Henry, which is 41.2, 17 Market West, which is 87, the Civic, that's 105. So typically on ground up new construction, we're targeting anywhere from 60 to 65 feet of floor plate depth. So, we're more than that. Typically you want to be 28, 30 feet deep on your unit, 5-foot corridors. If in the ideal world, if you were not designing on the ideal huge site. So I think Mark mentioned this earlier, the actual floor plate itself, what are we at? Something like 22,500 square feet per floor. It's 259 feet by 87 foot 4. So we ended up at an 83.6% efficiency, which is pretty darn good. With 299 units with an average unit size. This is adding all the units, the total BOMA square footage together and dividing it by 299, 814 square feet. And the building has 189 parking spaces as well. So overall floor plans, this is just kind of giving everybody some context of the basement, or the concourse, which we've already talked about, in the ground floor. The 2nd through 5th floor is parking garage. That's where we have 189 spots. There is some EV parking. Maybe, Mark, you could talk a little bit about having 189 parking spaces for 299 units and how that's been advantageous to attracting tenants.
Yeah, sure. So despite this being a TOD, right over top of suburban station, with the targeted demographic, and particularly in a post-pandemic world, we are seeing a higher demand for having car spaces or parking spaces for tenants to have cars. And we have seen that trend grow since the pandemic. And so having 190 or so parking spaces really was an embedded amenity that was a differentiator within the marketplace.
So I think we're just going to take you through a couple typical unit plans. And, as we go through these, I think that I'll try to ask the panel to chime in with comments that you have on these unit plans. So the most common unit plan in the building is this one here. We've called it a junior 1-bedroom. So it's a really nice, 15 by 15 living room, a shared light bedroom, a nice linear kitchen, bathroom, washer dryer closet with entry closet. So one of the things we did on the MEP side is a 2-pipe heat pump. So we centrally located that to avoid ductwork. Maybe you could address that, Jim, on like how we located that in the unit and why that didn't require ductwork, which got us to something that's quite efficient, but got good distribution throughout the unit for
Yeah.
conditioning.
Absolutely. I think the biggest driver of that was reutilizing the existing distribution systems, more so the pathways of the building. Built as an office, everything was centralized and kind of spread out like a spider. So what we did was utilize that distribution with the new layout and new equipment. So locating that air handler close to the corridor where we could tap off of piping to give the ceilings, to give these guys the ability to get the ceilings that they wanted was critical. And I think what you don't see in a lot of the market, which I commend Alterra for doing, is it used to be, many years ago, you were seeing chilled water systems in apartments. That went away. It went to water source heat pump systems. Then it went air-cooled VRF. I think the opportunity to reuse some of the infrastructure is giving a tenant, a chilled water fan coil system that performs in a comfort scenario a lot better than some of the competitors have out there.
And Eileen, I think you had some great concepts on how to separate the bedroom from the living room and that opening between the spaces, which was a pretty large opening, but maybe you could address, what you designed there and how that works functionally.
We have this unique opportunity, especially in model units, to sort of help prospective tenants envision how to use space. And there are multiple ways to use space. And of course, we try and think about sort of the demographics and how people will want to sort of best utilize it. So in the model unit, we created a little work from home space, and obviously it could be transposed into absolutely anything else. But which actually in model units, we try and take advantage of every open space and show all the possibilities. I mean, that's from a marketing standpoint, from a design standpoint, that's our obligation.
One of the things also I liked about these units is they typically allowed a work from home desk right next to the large plantation shutters next to the desk in the bedroom that you could open and get natural light and a view out. You could turn your head and look outside, see what the weather is while you're working from home, rather than burying that desk further in closer to the corridor. There's 4 corners. Obviously, this building is a very simple rectangle, but at each corner, we decided to do a 2-bedroom unit. And one of the key decisions on laying out these units was trying to get as much light as possible in the living space. So we always located the living room kitchen in the corner of the unit and made the bedrooms off the corner. And all of these units, we typically have a very large walk-in closet that you get to get to your bathroom with a double bowl vanity and shower. I don't know if there's anything you want to address about this unit. Anyone? Yeah.
Look, I think just maybe take a step back. Originally, when we looked at this, there was 325.
That's correct,
right?
Correct.
And that was part of Adam's mastermind. I think he's amongst the best in the business for this type of stuff, and that worked from an underwriting standpoint, and quite frankly, arguably better than what we ended up building. The end product unit count is 299, but we thought that there was a growing demand for larger unit formats, and so far that actually has played out to be quite the case. 2-bedroom units have been the first to be leased, and actually have been leasing at a faster pace than even the smaller format units, the junior 1-bedrooms. So I think that worked pretty well, and to Adam,
it was a great decision to go with more 2-bedrooms.
Yeah, we have like roughly a 60-40 unit breakdown. 60% 1-bedrooms, 40% 2-bedrooms. But to Adam's credit, they were able to really come up with really creative, efficient designs that worked well both 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom apartments.
Yeah. And at one point, we even kicked around some really premium penthouse units. There's a pop-up that occurs on the north side of the building, and we were going to do some lofted units with mezzanines. And so we really studied quite a few different types before settling on this final 299 unit count. So there's a couple unique unit types, and these unit types tend to happen around the core of the building, right? And so you end up with these long sort of fingers, if you will. And so in these instances, we typically made these study carrels, closets, bathrooms with double vanities. This one here has a full laundry room, double vanity in the bathroom. So we tried to work with the space as best we could. Like, obviously we're wrapping around the corner, and the name of the game here was to try to get the leasable square footage to increase and also be benefit to the tenant. This is a unique unit because there's 2 work from home study pods as well on Plan South.
I would add to that, Adam. I think this, these unique units show your guys' skill set in connecting with the egress and the elevator. There's a lot of gloss over, but everybody in here, if you've worked on a project like this on the multifamily side, that was very complicated. There was a lot of iterations, went back and forth, and did a great job making it, be functional at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think, we worked closely with Alterra to decide what these little rooms should be. Like, sometimes it was a study room because it didn't make sense where it was to make it the laundry room. Here on this one, getting the double bowl vanity is huge in a bedroom of this size, and to have like a laundry room in your unit is just pretty spectacular. So in given the context of the competition, it's very rare to have a walk-in laundry room. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So we were able to use every nook and cranny of these units, and got, again, really creative with every single square inch, to Eileen's credit as well. I mean, in terms of the model units and the overall interior design spirit, that's part of the game when it comes to conversions, right? How can you thoughtfully and creatively and innovatively maximize the utility of these spaces? And so far, I think the team's done an excellent job.
So there's some bullet points here on the advantages of the existing MEP, FP infrastructure. So I'm going to pass it over to Jim. He put together some bullet points here, which he's touched on some of these already. But hoping you could maybe further elaborate on some of these.
Sure. I think the most important part of this project is Alterra's process, involving all of the design team, all of the contractors, even in acquisition of the building. When you're doing an OTR, getting an understanding of the building itself as you're working through that financial process and how iterative that is, it carries through the entire design process. And using the design build model, I think what really makes a project like this go, because through that, we're able to figure out, okay, they've done good maintenance on the chilled water system. They have newer chillers. They were able to capture and reuse those systems. Cooling tower, we were able to reuse that. That really drives down that initial cost of construction in a project of this nature. And it's always the big things that nobody wants to worry about, but are the most important things when you're in the building. You want your power on, you want your heating and cooling on, and you want your domestic water functioning properly. So reusing things like the bus duct, the distribution there, it sounds like a simple thing, yes or no, to reuse it, but it took a lot of work with contractors, testing, verifying, seeing if we could get parts. This is all before we even really get into design. We're doing this within days of trying to figure out, does this pencil out and work? So there's a lot of thought put in up front that pays dividends as we go through construction. I'd like to think a lot of it helps avoid a lot of that back end on a typical design bid build, where we're trying to figure it out at the end of the game. So yeah, I think that was some of the bigger systems that we were able to capture. That's, I think, one of the things that is kind of unique, it's kind of coming back, that Alterra is doing is we're able to reutilize the steam system. A lot of people are going off of steam, but we came up with a pretty good play on generating domestic hot water with a steam service that's already there and reutilizing that. And a lot of this plays into sustainability. What I see truly as sustainability is recapturing what's already there, getting the rest of the useful life out of it, instead of replacing it with a brand new, maybe a little bit more efficient, really using what we have and capturing that.
So here we have a little diagram that kind of explains the system with some bullet points around it, Jim. So I know you've touched on this before, and you did just touch on this, but anything you want to add here about the 2-pipe system?
Sure. Yeah, so essentially, because it was a chilled water building for office before, we were able to give them now a residential chilled water residential facility. So you got your fan coil in your apartment, and for the cooling, we're using the chilled water, which gives us really good humidity control. Also does all the standard cooling. And then we have electric resistance heat on each fan coil unit to provide the electric heat. Again, getting off of our carbon consumption, right? We're using direct electric resistance heat. A lot of our sister cities, New York, Boston, they're all going full electric on the building. So it really is a marketable, ever since COVID, everybody's paying attention to what I do now inside their space when they're buying apartments. So I think, a lot of these things that were done are really adding value to people who are paying attention to what they're buying.
The other
thing-
really,
sorry.
real quick, Adam, the
Yeah.
other real elegant thing about this approach is that it minimizes the amount of duct work that's needed to condition the units. And duct work in my world is bad. We always try to cut down on duct work. It's inefficient, it's expensive to build, and it also impacts those ceiling heights that we were trying to hold at 9 foot clear. So we really had minimal amount of duct in this work, which I thought was, a testament to this team and the collaboration that went into it. As detailed as locating the stacked fan coil unit system within an inch within the stacked units from each floor. So it really did require a lot of coordination and a heavy lift. But I think the end product really speaks for itself.
In the initial concept phase, we were still a 2-pipe system, but it was horizontal. It was going to be hung from the ceiling of the entry of the unit or above the bathroom. And then, as Mark mentioned, there's going to be a soffit and a ductwork in the bath throughout the bathroom, bedroom, and into the living room. So it really started to impact the look and feel of the space. So when Jim came to us with this, solution of no ductwork, vertical instead of horizontal, and locating it centrally in the unit. Now, in some of the 2-bedroom units, there's 2 or 3 of these units rather than 1. We loved it. It was a great solution, not just from a design point of view, but functionally, right?
Yeah.
So.
And in simplest terms, it takes a lot less energy to move water than it does to move air. So it has multiple benefits, right? It's the energy efficiency, the cost efficiency, and the space efficiency across the board.
So one of the things I want to talk about too is the exhaust and ventilation. So this is pretty common with high rises and even low rise buildings where you're trying to avoid having a bunch of louvers on the facade is a subduct system. So essentially it's a central duct that's in a bathroom, and then a pipe from within the bathroom that goes up to 22 inches inside that larger duct. And that's considered subducting. And normally that goes straight to the roof, and there's a fan sitting on top of it on the roof. And you don't have to worry about where the subduct goes. But on this one, we really challenged Jim because we decided to put a pool and a dog run and a lounge, pergolas. So Jim and his team, they came up with some really creative solutions here on how to horizontally transfer that subduct below the level of the roof. And he deserves a lot of credit for making the roof deck kind of what it is, like aesthetically, because of his solution here. So maybe you could talk about that, Jim, and like how you guys approach that with the team.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think first and foremost, what's key here about the subduct system, as Adam had mentioned, that's how we get our fire separation. To compare this, this is a real cost-efficient way of doing this by doing a subducted system. We do not have to do fire smoke dampers. And that's typically, as we're looking at the start of the project, how do we get the most cost-efficient side of the ventilation and the exhaust system? So going by subduct removes the need of doing fire smoke dampers, which costs a lot of money. One thing I do want to add on the ventilation side, what you see here, what we're allowed to do in Philadelphia and what we're allowed to do with this job under the 2018 codes was really pressurize the corridor, deliver our ventilation air from the roof and serve it through the corridors and allow that to kind of trickle into the apartments, so to speak, under our pressurization of the apartments versus the corridors, and capture the utilization of, really operable windows where you can. Just as a heads up, 2021 code, you're no longer going to be able to do this. That most of your other cities, Boston, New York, Baltimore, DC, they've all transitioned and have not allowed that exception to the rule. So that's something that's going to change as we go forward in these buildings. But what we've done and what we've learned over the years on the coordination at the top of the building, that's where we first start. When we jump into a job at the schematic level, we're talking through with the folks. We've gotten away from, technology has gotten us so into the details so fast. What we focus at Bala to work with architects, we try to speak in their terms. Doesn't matter which pipe, whether it's a rainwater conductor, whether it's a sanitary pipe, whether it's the collection duct, you need 3 feet at the top. We'll work with you any way we need to work, but give me 3 feet here, give me 2 feet here. That's really the best way to get to the quickest solution. Because us trying to figure out what the architect wants to accomplish in detail, or them trying to figure out what we want to accomplish in detail, only creates back and forth and wasted time. So that's really important in the beginning, is have that teamwork and really chop up the building of areas where we can fly and no fly, essentially.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, Alterra did a great job of bringing all the team members together early in the process so that these conversations happened early. And we didn't limit the conversations and possibilities. So it wasn't just talking about unit layouts and unit mixes. It was also HVAC discussions. What works for the building?
Yep.
How are we subducting? How do we make the roof work? And that those early conversations with the whole team, the engineers, the architects, the designers, is critical to have a successful project and to not to have too many unforeseen conditions.
And I would just add real quick, more importantly, Brett and his team, we're not going to get it perfect as designers. Having them being partners up front, they're going to find stuff. There's going to be stuff that doesn't really draw out like that. The contractor can't really build it like that. It was a great partnership from day one going through it that, really facilitates getting it built, getting it done.
So the interior design vision, I'll pass this over to you, Eileen.
Well, that was a great segue into, because I do want to also acknowledge the fact that I think when the ink dried is really when the entire team was assembled, literally from day one, and including the interior design team. And that is definitely something that I don't take for granted, but I want to acknowledge and recognize Alterra's commitment to having the interiors component literally from day one. And it is incredibly important for our team to understand the process, the challenges, the vision, the owner's vision, the capabilities and abilities of the project, the building, becoming intimate with the building, feeling it, seeing it, understanding it and its environs. There will always be surprises. There will always be challenges. There will always be budget constraints. And if you're not there from day one, there are opportunities that are missed, and also expensive mistakes can be made. So that is an acknowledgement if anybody's sort of assembling a team for any projects. I want to mention the success hinges on that. So just to talk about vision, the very early conversations with Alterra was very much that this building was to have a sense of, obviously, everybody knew this was a very important building. It was creating a new neighborhood, a new living situation in a corridor that was not typically residential. And the vision was definitely that of wellness. Those were the early words that we heard. And when you step back and you think about what wellness means, I mean, wellness could be a noun or it could be a verb, but it certainly came out first with, we want certain sort of amenity spaces that had a certain programming, and you'll see a little bit more about that. But that's very much a concrete definition. In my view, it was interpreted as well-being. And what does well-being, apparently in a very sort of hustle bustle corner, what does that actually mean? What is the sort of feeling that a prospective tenant should have, or what do we want them to have when they walk in from that very busy corner? And so it was not only wellness from a programming and perspective, but what do they feel? So we'll get into a little bit more because design has pretty visuals. But feeling very strongly about design should not only be seen, but almost to a cellular, visceral level, one should really experience that. So this is great, this is good, but I might have to stand up to sort of narrate this a little bit better. Obviously, there's a lot of history of this building, and that it sits on top of a transportation hub. And so early on, we looked at railroad tracks and the gestures that a sort of an intersection of railroad tracks would have beneath us. We even looked at sort of the shape of a train. We looked at how columns were being treated in train stations. We looked at mosaic patterns. We looked at sort of the nod of history in this existing, and that's sort of the beauty of an existing building, right? It gives you all of these histories and all of these stories and all of these hints. Your work is kind of done for you. You just have to see them and figure it all out. And then you can sort of see how we sort of interpreted some of those gestures. So in this middle sort of banquette area, I mean, if you sort of see its adjacent image with the train tracks and the sort of gentle radii, and how we sort of used that with the woodwork, and how if you sort of closed your eyes, you could sort of see that gentle sort of, you know, SEPTA train, don't tell anybody, but, and a booth, right? Sort of something that looked like a proper seating in a train. But we also looked to the exterior, and for me, I was kind of moved by the limestone, and I was even more moved by Alterra's commitment to preserving it and maintaining it, and reusing it in the beautiful way that it was treated. So choosing stone in the building also was what's another beautiful classic stone. And, you know, we chose a chocolate travertine, which has sort of that same buttery feel as the limestone on the exterior. But we also chose it, for example, because if you look down 17th Street and you just sort of see these layers or a portal of tones and colors, it seemed to sort of capture a cityscape if you, again, sort of imagined it very loosely and very poetically. We also made very conscious decisions not to do anything that felt trendy. No, there's no sort of polished surfaces, no high gloss surfaces. We sort of embraced the fact that we weren't going to do anything different on the interior storefronts that are stainless steel. So in some cases, they were oxidized to sort of take that sort of institutional feel off of it. But we also went one step further and embraced a little bit of steel. And you can see that in the column again, perhaps a little nod to train tracks, but just bringing it into the building in a very quiet and elegant way. But the entire lobby is pretty much handmade with local fabricators. There's a lot of wood. Wood obviously softens the sensations and the feel, especially when you're coming in from a lot of hardscape, glass and steel and you know, other granite and other building materials on the exterior. But bringing the outside in was an important, you know, we can say that, but it is a very important sort of interpretation. And how do you do that in an elegant, simple way? So that's a little bit of the sort of broad gestures or broad definitions of the vision itself. So yeah, let me see what that next slide is. Let me talk to that one. There we go. And there's our model unit. So that's our 2-bedroom model unit, and it's on obviously a beautiful corner of the building, southeast. But if you know, model units are typically the very first and only thing that is finished in a building under construction, and we have this unique opportunity to say absolutely everything you need to say about the building and what it will be in a model unit. And so we don't take that that messaging lightly, because it is a design message, but it's a marketing message. And it is, it really does foretell what people should expect. So to that end, you know, we kept to the same sort of tonal feel and the very natural feel. And if you look out that window down 17th Street, you sort of see almost all of those colors. And those tones of all of the buildings come into the living space, and it's pretty powerful. Come over at 5 o'clock for happy hour. It is the most magnificent site down 17th Street, because it is truly everything that this building says, which is just that it's in the middle of this very active corridor, the lights, the people, the activity, and here you are just sort of perched and enjoying absolutely everything about city living that you could imagine. But there is definitely a certain wonderful sort of calm. So this is the unique and wonderful opportunity that we have, is to sort of show everything this building will have in a model unit. Our lobby. So our lobby space is, as I described, it's very minimal intentionally. I will tell you that it is very hard to do minimal. It's very easy to do maximal and put everything in it. Every piece of furniture that is in there is incredibly special, handmade. It's all about textures. It's extremely tonal. It is, the tones riff off of this beautiful natural material, this chocolate travertine and the limestone and the wood. But indeed, people say this feels like, you know, it's such an escape. And the answer is I don't want it to be an escape. You're here because you want to be here in the city. What it is really an opportunity to just come off the busy street and exhale. All the lighting fixtures are handmade in a small production lighting. Again, furniture is small production. We work with sort of our, you know, A-team fabricators in steel and stone and millwork. So I don't know if I have anything else.
We could go down to the concourse.
Yeah, sure. Let's go to the concourse. So the concourse is, I guess, a floor and a half below ground. And so that is a pretty expansive space of the fitness center, which is a pretty robust wellness program that has a half basketball court. I don't want to take Mark's.
No, go for it. You're doing great.
But like, so a half basketball court and a pickleball court, and the bathrooms have cold plunges and saunas, and there is a CrossFit area and fitness equipment and a yoga room and a golf simulator and basically a community space. The club room, so that's wellness on steroids.
So that's
in the
that's
very
plan
best
south
way.
in the image, the plan that you see here.
Correct.
So plan north is the club room that you see in the lighter yellow color, which I'll go to that.
The wellness, it's not just a brand, right? This gives people a very tangible, practical way to practice wellness, anywhere from the saunas to the cold plunges to the CrossFit, the yoga room, the Nautilus area, as well as social wellness and well-being, right? So you want to?
Yeah, I mean, social. So we'll go back to the club room on the well-being, and you know, I heard a study today about sort of, you know, particularly post-COVID, and we sort of and in the time of social media, we really do struggle with loneliness, and so our spaces are all about how do you create a place where people can be together and congregate in different ways, together, singularly, to work, to play, et cetera. And certainly, you know, kudos to the property management teams that, you know, that also make that happen as well. But the club room also takes sort of a tonal kind of thing and a lot of nod to, you know, transport in that sort of the rich materials. We have a very sort of, and this was a big leap of faith to the Alterra Group because I don't think I've painted any walls quite this dark, but it is a deep, deep oxblood burgundy. And they were like, let's do it. So it is very sort of club room and speakeasy, but yet in a very sort of sophisticated way as well. Again, there are ways to interact with your, you know, your fellow tenants. There's also a private dining room, which can be used as a small conference room or a private party. There is a bar as well. So, and a pool table in that area as well. So we're nearing completion on that in the next short time period.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're gonna jump.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot we had these
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fitness center renderings. So yeah,
Oh,
this really kind of
The space was a bus terminal back a few decades ago. And so they literally would drive buses into the space for maintenance and washing. And so we had tremendous ceiling height to the tune of 23 plus feet. And you don't find that too often. In fact, if you were to build this new out of the ground, you wouldn't, because you wouldn't be able to afford it. And so one great thing about these conversions is that, you know, you are able to capitalize off a space that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to build in a new construction build. And so that allowed us the opportunity to put a pickleball court, which is a true, fully dimensioned pickleball court, just about regulation size. Become pretty doggone close to that column, but those columns will be padded. But we were able to fit a full regulation size pickleball court in this workout area. So I'm pretty excited about that.
So the last part is details, and this is really about the execution on the details. So I think construction execution is critically important. So Brett, I know you kind of put some bullet points together here that you wanted to
Thank
touch
you.
on.
You guys kind of touched on this, but you know, we never could have pulled off such a challenging project without Alterra putting together such a great team of collaborators. I mean, as much as we could spend months on planning out the execution of this project, there's always something that comes up, and this team was very accountable, and everyone always had a sense of urgency to keep this project moving forward. So that's number one. Without a team that's working together, these projects always turn out unsuccessful. The second most important thing is having trusted trade partners. I mean, a lot of people don't think about that, but you know, having subcontractors that are willing to work with you and problem solve, not work against you, help you figure out and take the project apart and then put it back together and figure out how you're going to execute it. And when problems come up with procurement or logistics or sequencing or price, they work with you towards a common goal to, you know, at the end of the day, deliver our contract, our goal, and on time. And lastly, for execution was really thinking through, you know, how we were going to sequence this work, how we were going to execute the logistics. You know, it's an urban job, but and it was great to have the loading dock, but everything we were doing on the inside of this building, which was a gut and a rebuild, not that challenging. We do it all the time. We're using a lot of existing equipment. That's great. That helps. But to cut down that limestone, remove the windows, do the podium, do the sky frame, and then at the same time, put the amenity on the roof with a pool, made it extremely challenging. And, you know, at the end of the day, we ended up, you know, adding the hoist on the JFK side. And we decided to put swings on the entire building for over a year, so we could sequence the work. It was kind of like a symphony, and we met every morning and met with all the trades, because we would have guys on swings on the upper floors removing windows and cutting limestone, while we had guys on the lower floors reframing that work and working on a lot of the exterior metal cladding, and then later on the podium. In addition, later on in the job, once we got most of the work done on 6 through 12 to get it enclosed in order to start the drywall, we had a lot of the podium work going on. and then the sky frame work, which continued to be a logistics challenge, but being thought through, it was successful.
So just a few last slides here to kind of illustrate some of the points Brett was talking about and to talk about one unforeseen condition. So lucky 13th floor. There was a concrete vault that we didn't know. When we got the plans and reviewed the plans from Cohn Penderson Fox in 1999, we had every floor plan. This vault wasn't shown. The way that the project was sequenced, it didn't really allow us to go in and verify this condition because it was hidden behind a bunch of drywall walls, and there was no way for us to really know it was there. So, you know, what you see in this rendering, sort of the brown orangish color, are the existing walls of the vault. Eventually, it originally had all four corners.
Real quick, it wasn't
Yes.
only a vault, because we've done conversions
Yes.
with vaults. This
It's
thing
a-
was integral to the superstructure of the
Correct.
building. So it was a load-bearing vault.
Correct. Yes.
It wasn't
So-
just walls, it was floors and ceilings.
So it involved structural reinforcement of the beams on the floor below. So we would put new wide flange columns in below the existing beams because the columns, the girders here between the columns were upset W24s, meaning the W24s were actually above the floor slab and cast into the concrete vault. So, you know, as Mark and Brett just pointed out, it was very challenging. But we cut many openings in it, and Caleb, our structural engineer, was great in kind of working with the team. And you can't tell. That's the big thing. If you were in the building today on the 13th floor and had one of these units, you wouldn't know it was there. So the limestone removal. So Brett addressed this. One of the things that we did, and Mark and his team were very involved with this, was coming up with a solution that was cost effective and constructible to reinforce the existing limestone that allowed us to saw cut the limestone from the interior. So what we came up with was a C5 channel welded to the perimeter beam about 32 inches on center, and that C5 channel had a 3x3 angle clip on it. So you'll see it in this photo where the limestone's kind of cut and demolished. You can see that there's a steel channel there with a clip that anchors to the back of the limestone. We had to install that first before we cut the limestone because, as Mark mentioned, when they cut the sill of the windows in ¡99 and connected it all, they had a steel piece higher up at 36 inches above the floor that was holding the limestone in place. So it was a real challenge. Anything you'd like to add, Brett?
You know, I think the survey took the longest to really figure out what we had because every floor wasn't different, and we came up with a solution that curb is going to be about 5 inches. That way it could be consistent throughout. And then we were trying to figure out how we're going to cut this thing safely over 17th Street, over JFK, over Market Street. And then we ended up coming up with this giant saw on a pallet jack
Here it is.
that by the time we were done figuring this out, we realized that it needed 10 feet clearance. So as we were trying to lay out and frame and do rough in on these floors, we had to really try to push to accelerate this limestone cutting safely. And we had 2 of these machines made, and they worked counterclockwise on the same floor, and they would just work their way up the building, and we would follow right behind them with framing out these openings to put the windows in, because obviously the goal is by the time we get done our rough-in inspections, we want to throw rock on the floor, and we got to have it watertight. So it was a challenge.
Thank you.
Those pictures don't even do it justice. There was countless hours from the planning and execution phase of that. So credit to the team. They're really rolling up their sleeves all the way from Caleb, the structural team, the architectural team, to the construction team. It really was an impressive feat. And I'm biased, but I think we did a much better job than they did in the 90s.
Yeah, I think that, yeah,
Agreed.
I agree. I think we came up with more potential options to support the limestone than we did for some of the unit plans, just so you know
True
how much
statement.
thought went into this. Yeah. So,
5 options.
the last thing's the sky frame. So a lot of you might have been wondering, like, how did you get these huge pieces of steel onto the roof? And so I'm going to let Brett address the crane and the pick and what went into that, closing the street down. So
I'll just talk about the roof in general. You know, with putting the pool, we had to do a lot of steel reinforcing up on that roof deck. And then we had to safely peel back all the coping and the CMU back up in order to understand where exactly the steel was, so we could do a survey, fabricate some base plates and weld those base plates at every one of those, I believe, 30 column locations around the perimeter in advance of doing 2 weekend crane picks. Because you got to remember, we had 2 500-ton cranes that were sitting out in the street that you could only do on weekends. And we would set half of them on one weekend and just bolt them down in place. And then the following weekend, we did the other half. And then we spent about 2 weeks after that welding them all in place so that we could then continue with the facade of the Skyframe.
Last slide, actually, before questions, I forgot about this one. So the garage perforated panels. So we've gotten a lot of questions from people on this, and I think, you know, Mark, if anybody, deserves the most credit for it. And that's because Mark insisted on in-field mock-ups. We originally thought that 30% openness on the panels would be sufficient, but that ended up proving to be too transparent. You could see too much of the limestone and windows behind. So then we went to 23%. It still was too much. So then we ended up at 10%. And 10%, I think was the right choice. And we actually delayed things, I think, a little bit schedule-wise to get this right.
Maybe a little bit delayed.
Just a little. So
Depends on who you ask.
I think the success is counted in the number of text messages Mark and the Alterra team got from other friends and developers in the city saying, "Man, that looks great." So yeah.
You know, I'll say, you know, I'm glad we got it right.
Yeah.
I really am, because it does look great, but you know, to do the podium, you needed the swings. And the longer the swings were on the building, the longer it held us up with actually, you know, completing the roof work. And as you can see, the roof is complicated, installing a pool, doing all the pedestals, the pavers, everything else that's up there. So it took a little bit longer. We got it right. We're getting it done. That's it.
Thanks. We'll open up to questions.
Yeah, so flag me down if you have a question, but Mark, why don't you give us a little context? It seems like the sort of greater national community is finding out about these office to residential conversions, and everyone's like, we need to do more, we need to incentivize more. And then there's a lot of folks in Philadelphia who say, well, we've been doing this really well for quite a while. So where are you on that spectrum of where we are in terms of the trend of these conversions?
Yeah, so for many years, Philadelphia has actually been poster child for conversions. You know, it started, I would say, back in the 90s when there was a flight to quality already, when the new office trophy towers that you see today that make up our skyline were being built. And so that naturally left buildings like 1616 Walnut and 1515 Chestnut Street and 1401 Arch Street vacant, which were older post-World War II built buildings. And so we've been doing it for a long time here in Philadelphia. In many respects, I like to think of us as a trendsetter in that regard. In addition to that, we have a very permissive, favorable zoning code that accommodates changes of uses by right. And so credit to the city, where credit's due. The city doesn't always get a whole lot of credit, but in this case, I think it's well deserved, because you have a CMX5 and a CMX4 zoning code that really gives you the by right opportunity to change use just through a local building permitting process. And there is a zoning process, but really it's an over-counter process. So that's not the case in other peer cities. And I know this because we've looked at other peer cities, both south of us and north of us. And those cities are just starting to catch up to what I think was a very progressive zoning code with a lot of foresight by our city. So I think because of those reasons, conversions have been happening here for a long time, and will continue. But unfortunately, and I've said this before, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked over, and so now you're starting to see conversion opportunities, but they're not necessarily as straightforward as a 1701 Market Street. You're dealing with deep floor plates. You're dealing with Wanamaker. Thank you for that, which we're dealing with right now. And so we're really working to reverse engineer and embrace some of those floor plates to create really interesting creative units. So more to come on that. Stay tuned. But I do think other cities have started to take notice of what we've been doing for a while now, and there's a lot of concerted effort in terms of legislation and city governments to implement more favorable zoning codes that give building owners the opportunity to have a live, work, play environment under one roof. So I do think you also see a little bit more in the suburbs as well, as we start to study other built environments outside of Philadelphia proper. The problem there is that you also don't have necessarily a favorable zoning code. So there's still, I think, a lag for those conversions. But so long as you work with the local governments and townships, there's a learning curve there. And so in terms of speed to market, I think we're really, really well positioned here in Philadelphia.
Thank you for your presentation. Two quick questions. Number one, did you run into any issues with building asbestos? And secondly, with the beautiful windows, what do you anticipate for cleaning both inside and outside? Residents' responsibility inside? Is the external windows going to be cleaned?
Do you want to answer the asbestos question, Brett?
You can.
Okay, so we had minimal asbestos, fortunately, based on the previous renovations that had been done by previous ownership as well as tenant fit out. So Morgan Lewis, they were the single anchor tenant in the building. There was one office tenant on floors 2 through 18, and so to their credit, they really dealt with a lot of that stuff. We did encounter some of it in the mechanical penthouses on the roof, as well as I think the 18th floor ceiling. There was a section of asbestos that needed to be contended with. But for the most part, this building was very clean. Now, to your point, whenever you're talking about conversions, particularly some of those older buildings, this was built in 1957, still, asbestos was being used, but I don't think as predominantly as some of the older buildings of, say 80 to 100-year vintage. I think they stopped using asbestos in the 80s, 70s, 80s. So to your point, it's always something that we're very sensitive to with conversions. That was your one question. The other question was window cleaning. So there are davits, anchors, roof cleaning anchors and davits designed quite well, by the way. I'll let you handle one of that, because that's a good question, because they're always kind of the last thing. No one remembers them until you have to clean a window. But the landlord is taking care of all the exterior cleaning, and then the interior windows is, of course, the tenant's responsibility. So you want to talk about the davits a little bit?
So NORR has designed a lot of new ground up high rise. We've done a few high rise conversions, but one of the things we know that we have to talk about early on is davits and window cleaning, exterior window cleaning. So with the sky frame, that afforded us a really great advantage. So there's a low tube, steel tube on the sky frame that's about 4 feet above the ground. On that, we welded certain tie-off points that you can get to, like about 6-8 feet on center. And then on the sky frame columns, about, I don't know, 10 feet above the deck, maybe. Right. There's these little, if you were up there, you'd see them. There's these little doors, and you can open it. And what they did is they cut out a section of the column, welded another tube there, and reinforced the column so that you can put a davit arm all the way through every single column for a swing stage or bosun chair to clean those windows.
And to think about it, I mean, that needs to be caught very early in the design. It has to be caught in the shop drawing review process. I mean, the detail work that went into that was quite extensive. So again, kudos to the team for getting in front of that at the design phase and not too late in the game. Window coverings on the inside?
There are solar, yes, there are, I believe we put 1% solar screens in there. In all rooms, living room, bedrooms.
Good. I assume that you have seen office buildings that you considered converting and decided not to do it for various reasons. What are some of the challenges that persuade you that it's not practical to do a conversion?
So one building that comes to mind was in Cleveland that I studied probably 2 years ago. We just couldn't get the efficiency that high. It was a massive floor plate. It was 125 feet deep. In that market, it didn't make sense to cut a light well. And based on the rents, it was even hard to consider replacing the existing windows, which weren't operable. So it also had 2 staircases right next to the elevator core. So we were having to add a 3rd stair all the way through the building just to make it work. So when certain things like that happen, like if you're in New York City, no problem. But some of these other markets, it doesn't pencil.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's well said. And, we have a term here out there, like, don't fight the building. There's only so much you can fight a building before you lose. And it kind of gets back to that efficiency ratio on the floor plates. If you're below, an 80%, and in fact, we'd like to see it further up into the 80s for things to underwrite properly, it's not going to work from a dollars and cents standpoint. So if it doesn't work on a spreadsheet, it's not going to work in real life. And so we have to maintain a level of discipline, even though if we love the location, some buildings are always going to be office buildings.
A bunch of really quick questions. That windscreen on the roof, so how do you keep that clean? And the birds that crash into it and stuff, is that included in that thing that you just talked about, the cleaning thing?
Yeah, so the David arms are actually at an elevation that's higher.
Okay.
So you'd be able to access that. It's easily cleaned from the inside. The outside, you'd have to do a
Got it.
Bosun chair.
And the fitness rooms, which are in the concourse, which are underground, but they look like they had windows.
There's Kim. Want to talk to that, Kim?
Were they? Oh, they.
So I'll paraphrase.
Yeah.
Summarize. So the question was about the keen eye over here in the audience saw windows in the basement, and she's correct. It is you're 2 levels below grade, so you're subterranean. But it was important for us to create the illusion that you weren't subterranean. You're not working out underground right next to Commerce Street, because right beyond that exterior wall is Commerce Street. And so we were able to design 3, with Kimberly's help, 3 and Dr. D Electric and a few others, 3 faux windows that are backlit with a very natural light. So it creates the illusion and really the sensation when you walk through that space that you're not really underground.
So I'm curious if there were conversations as part of the planning process about opportunities for minimizing the environmental impact of this process. So thinking about reusing any of the building materials, or you mentioned sort of solar, using some solar sort of panels on the windows, if there were other things that were discussed as part of the process.
So I think the biggest thing is actually reusing as much of the limestone as possible. We did create more window area, as you saw. It went from about 45% windows to 66% windows. With that, it's a more efficient window. There's a solar heat gain coefficient on it and a better coating within the windows. But I think, there were early conversations about, do we just take all the limestone off the building and do a glass tower, which I think happened at the Franklin's built, where's
That's
that,
right.
20th and
16th. 16th, I believe, right?
16th.
16th and JFK?
16th JFK. So like, there's some people that have taken that approach, I think by keeping
Arch, 16th
Arch,
Arch.
16th and Arch, like where they basically took the entire facade off the building and went all glass. So there's less embodied, there's a lot of existing embodied carbon in the existing materials. And so we were trying to utilize those as much as possible. Even when it comes to the parking garage, we kept the existing windows and the limestone. That's why we went with the 10% openness, so that was kind of obscured, so that we still get daylight into the parking garage, but you didn't really see it. So as far as MEP systems, I don't, reusing as many of those as possible was pretty efficient, but we didn't, as far as green technologies, like
I would say it's inherently
Yeah.
sustainable, as we were talking about earlier, where you're repurposing what's already there. You might not be able to classify it as a lead building or a lead task, but I think, kind of thinking bigger picture, not, seeing the forest through the trees, is that reusing the systems is your first path of being sustainable, right? Reclaiming that and taking it to the end of its useful life, instead of ripping out all that, what it takes to get new systems to us, to a location, right? The delivery, the cost, the fuel consumption there. I think how Alterra looks at it from a big picture perspective, it saves them on cost efficiency, but is being practical and reusing what you can, I think is the biggest part of it. And in regards to energy efficiency, I'd say, for being an existing office, the level of efficiency that you have in the windows, you saw we increased a lot of the actual glass. Right? That's a penalty really against the energy code and what we're doing. So by doing that, we had to model the building to prove that it conforms. So when you're not following the book, the checklist of energy efficiency, where you're just doing the basic things, you have to get creative. And okay, so now I need to have a better performing HVAC system. I need to do something different with my air distribution to get other areas. So I think going down that path of not only getting the aesthetics, but improving the glass, it really took the whole thing and put it together rather than looking at each item individually. A lot of words to say. I don't know if that answered your question.
Hey, how much did this conversion cost, and how much would it have cost to completely demolish and build from the ground up?
So I'm not going to comment on the cost per square foot, but I will say we estimate that it would have cost, in terms of like replacement costs, probably $130 million more to build from new.
Quick question about daylighting in the bedrooms. How you address the code issues for daylight in bedrooms, especially the 1-bedroom unit?
Yeah, so there's a section in the code, I think it's chapter 12, interior environments, where it talks about getting to 35 square feet. And if you have a 35 square foot opening with an adjoining room, it allows that. So basically, we Eileen designed these plantation shutters that the bifolding that you could open, but the actual opening itself was right around 30, I think at 35 square feet, exactly. So it's just open. So the idea being that, that the way the code looks at it is, since it's an adjoining room and that adjoining room has natural ventilation, that's a large enough opening without a door that natural ventilation can get into the bedroom with the windows open.
So that approach is actually the first time that we've done that. Historically, when we call them junior 1-bedrooms, when you have an interior bedroom from the exterior wall. And we've done them across our portfolio, even 10 years ago when we were doing conversions. But historically, we've always done like an overhead transom. For this project, we wanted to be a little bit more intentional, a little bit more deliberate, and kind of integrate that rough opening into the interior design of the space. And so that's where Eileen did her magic. It came out with a very elegant plantation shutter approach, where if you're in that room and the blinds or the shutters are open, you have the direct sights out to the exterior wall to your window. And it really does create the sense that you are on an exterior wall while in the bedroom.
So we had the depth of unit there. So 41 to 43 feet deep unit. So we were the living rooms generally were 15 by 15. So the sill on these openings were maybe 2 feet above the ground. So you had a little bit of extra room in your bedroom. So the thought process being someone could set a desk up and look out a window. There's a lot of unit layouts out there where people are putting desks like right off the corridor. So they might have a really deep unit. You walk into the unit, right to your left when you walk in is a work from home office, then the bathroom, then the rest of the unit. The issue that I've heard about that from leasing agents is generally that doesn't lease well, or tenants don't like being able to look outdoors or see daylight, which is understandable. Yes, this puts the space in the bedroom, but the blur feature on Teams is used by many now. And I think that having that ability to look outside and have that daylight is advantageous. And I think it'll be well received by tenants. So potential tenants.
Yeah, so far, I mean, the leasing velocity of them has been tracking as projected. So far, the concept is working pretty well.
Well, I wanted to thank you all for coming in today and joining us. Please give a round of applause to this great team. It's nice to go all the way deep on a project and get into the nitty gritty. So thank you all for coming out. We will be back here on July 7th for SRDC, talking about the Schuylkill River Trail and all sorts of good stuff that they have planned. So that's all we have tonight. Thank you.
Good job. Doing well.